They say that grief is a heavy cloak, but on the day of my husband's funeral, it felt more like a suffocating fog. I stood there, clutching a damp handkerchief, my eyes fixed on the fresh earth that now covered the only man I had ever truly loved. Elias was my world, my partner, my rock, and the father of our unborn child. We had built a life together from nothing, transforming a dilapidated farmhouse into a sanctuary of warmth and laughter. But as I stood there, barely able to breathe, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a comforting hand. It was cold, bony, and possessed a grip that felt like a claim of ownership. I turned to see my father-in-law, Arthur. He wasn't crying. His eyes were dry, sharp, and scanning the crowd of mourners like a predator counting its prey. "You look tired, Sarah," he whispered, his voice cutting through the soft hymns of the choir. "Grief is expensive. Perhaps it's time we discussed the future. The family future." I didn't understand then. I thought he was offering help. I thought, in his own twisted way, he was trying to be the patriarch Elias always said he was. But Elias had also warned me. "My father doesn't see people, Sarah," he once told me over coffee. "He only sees assets." The funeral wasn't even over before the vultures began to circle. That evening, as the last of the guests departed, Arthur sat in Elias's favourite leather armchair in our living room. He didn't ask for permission. He just sat there, swirling a glass of expensive scotch. He looked around the room, at the hand-painted tiles I'd chosen, the curtains I'd sewn, the memories we'd built. And he smiled, a thin, cruel smile. "This house," Arthur began, tapping his ring against the glass, "was bought with a loan from the family trust, a trust that stays within the bloodline. Now that Elias is gone, the property reverts. It's only natural." My heart stopped. "What are you saying, Arthur? This is my home. We paid that loan back years ago. Elias showed me the papers." Arthur let out a dry, rattling laugh. "Paperwork has a funny way of disappearing, Sarah, or being misfiled. According to the current records, you are a guest in this house, a guest whose stay has officially ended." I looked at him, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. He knew I was pregnant. He knew I had nowhere else to go. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized there was no room for mercy. To him, I was an outsider who had dared to occupy his territory. I was a widow, shattered and broken, and he expected me to crumble. He expected me to pack my bags and disappear into the night, leaving behind everything Elias and I had worked for. But what Arthur didn't know that day was that Elias had left me more than just memories. He had left me a truth that would eventually bring Arthur's entire empire crashing down. The next week was a blur of cold letters and even colder heartbreaks. I was served with an eviction notice signed by Arthur's lawyers. They didn't just want the house. They wanted the savings, the small business Elias had started, and even the family heirlooms. They claimed everything was intertwined with the family estate. I felt so small. Every time I tried to argue, Arthur's legal team would bury me in jargon. I spent nights sitting on the floor of the nursery, the room that was supposed to be filled with a baby's laughter, now filled only with shadows. I felt shattered. My husband was gone, and now his own blood was trying to erase my existence. "It's for the best," Arthur told me when I confronted him at his office. "You're young. You'll find another life. But this property, this belongs to the bloodline. You're just a temporary branch that didn't quite take hold." The cruelty of his words acted like a spark in the dark. For days, I had been drowning in sorrow, but that word, temporary, changed something inside me. I wasn't a temporary branch. I was carrying the next generation. I was the bridge between Elias's past and his child's future. I stopped crying. I began to dig. I remembered Elias spent a lot of time in the attic during his final months. He knew he was sick long before he told me. He had been preparing for a storm he knew was coming. I spent 3 days sifting through old trunks and dusty crates until I found it. A small, fireproof box hidden behind a loose floorboard. Inside wasn't just the deed to the house. It was a ledger, not a business ledger, but a personal diary Elias had kept about his father's business practices. It turns out, Arthur hadn't just been misfiling my paperwork. He had been systematic. For decades, Arthur had been siphoning money from the family trust into offshore accounts, effectively stealing from his own relatives and the government to keep his empire afloat. Elias had documented everything: dates, account numbers, and signed confessions from employees Arthur had bullied into silence. My husband knew his father would come for me. He knew Arthur's greed would outweigh his humanity. Looking at those papers, the pain didn't disappear, but it was joined by a cold, sharp resolve. I realized that Arthur's power was built on a foundation of lies and stolen glass. All I had to do was pull the right thread, and the whole structure would unravel. I spent my last few nights in the house not packing clothes, but scanning documents. Every time I felt my strength waver, I thought of the way Arthur had looked at me at the funeral, as if I were nothing. I thought of my unborn child being cheated out of their father's legacy. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for justice. I wasn't the broken widow he thought I was. I was the storm he didn't see coming on the horizon.
The day of the final takeover arrived. Arthur showed up with a moving crew, ready to change the locks. He looked triumphant, dressed in a sharp suit as if he were attending a celebration rather than evicting a grieving woman. "Time to go, Sarah," he said, checking his gold watch. "The movers will take your personal items to a storage unit. Don't make this difficult." I stood on the porch, calm and steady. "I'm not going anywhere, Arthur, but I think you might want to call your lawyer, or perhaps a very good accountant." I handed him a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of the ledger page showing his most recent transfer from the family trust. I watched as the color drained from his face. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a frantic, twitching fear. "Where did you get this?" he hissed, his voice trembling. "Elias loved you, Arthur. But he didn't trust you," I said softly. "He left me everything, not just the house, but the truth. If you proceed with this eviction, or if you touch a single penny of Elias's estate, these documents go to the authorities and the rest of the family you've been robbing for years." He tried to bluster, to threaten me with his high-priced lawyers, but we both knew it was over. The evidence was undeniable. I watched as the great Arthur crumbled. He realized that by trying to take everything, he had risked losing his freedom. By the end of the afternoon, the moving trucks were gone. Arthur's lawyers sent over a new set of documents. This time, they were ironclad. He relinquished all claims to the house, the business, and the savings. He even gifted a significant portion of the trust to my child's future education as a peace offering. I didn't want his money, but I took it for my baby. It was the justice Elias would have wanted. As the sun set over the farmhouse, I sat on the porch swing, alone. The silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. Arthur had been exposed, his greed finally becoming his undoing. He lived the rest of his days in a quiet, shameful retirement, shunned by the family members he had betrayed. I learned something through the tears and the fire. Betrayal can shatter your